NuGet packages are a way to share versioned code with the world. If you've done any development in C#, you've probably used a NuGet package, even if you didn't know it. Almost every template in Visual Studio is made up of NuGet packages. That allows us to create flexible applications that upgrade parts of itself without having to upgrade everything. For instance, if a new version of Dapper comes out, I can continue to use my old version, or I can upgrade to a new version. If I have a problem with the new version, I can roll back to the old version. We take these packages for granted, but while almost every developer uses NuGet packages, relatively few ever create NuGet packages. Part of that comes from not thinking about code reusability beyond a given project, but a larger part of it comes from not knowing how to create NuGet packages. Today, we're going to address that second issue and at least touch on the first one. Now, NuGet packages have become so easy to create, we'll actually spend more time on deploying, managing, and hosting our package than we will on actually creating it. But before we dive in, I do want to mention that I have a special offer this month on Patreon. Anyone who is a current Patreon member at the $10 a month level or higher by the end of July, so even if you are not yet, you can either upgrade your package or you can, sign up now. So by the end of July, you'll receive an exclusive PDF I've created just for you. One of the struggles developers sometimes have is knowing what type of sample application to create. So I put together 15 great ideas. These aren't throwaway application ideas either. These 15 ideas can be real applications you can actually use. As an even bigger bonus, we're getting really close to the first big milestone on Patreon. Once a few more people come on board, I'll be publishing a behind-the-scenes mini documentary on how I create Monday videos. I'll give you a tour of my office, I'll look at how I plan a video, what testing I do before I start, and more, along with the actual video creation. That video will be exclusive to Patreon members at any level. Now, finally, I'm going to be running a Christmas and July sale soon. That'll be exclusive for my mailing list members. So if you aren't on the mailing list, now is the time to join. The link is in the description. Okay, let's get started. We're going to start by creating a new project, and we're going to do a .NET Standard class library. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. The best or the biggest reason why you want to create a .NET Standard library is because .NET Standard can target a number of different platforms. If you notice here, Android, iOS, Linux, Mac, Windows, these are all different platforms that a .NET Standard library can target. The other thing here is with the .NET Standard comes a much easier way of creating NuGet packages. And we'll talk about the alternatives because if you have a .NET Framework library, it's going to be a few more steps. I won't cover those steps today, but we'll talk about them a little bit. So let's create our .NET Standard library. And let's call this the helper library. And we're going to call this the NuGet demo solution. So NuGet demo. And we'll create this. And once we do, we're going to delete that class 1 that it creates by default. So let's delete that. And yes, we want to delete that permanently. And now let's right-click on Helper Library and go to Properties. This is one of those things you don't have to do if you don't want, but I'm going to do it because I want the namespace to be a little bit different. So I'm going to say the default namespace is IAmTimCorey.helpers. Okay? Which means that every class from now on will get that IAmTimCorey.helpers as the namespace, or the starter namespace. Let's create a folder in here. And we'll call this calculations. We can close out of this. We can right-click here. And this is all just demo code. We're not going to do anything really in-depth here. So I'm going to say calculator. Make it public. And this is my pretty standard I need to create a class library just to demo something calculation. So public static double add double x double y, and we can just do the simple return x plus y. And let's do one more, public static double subtract double x double y, return x minus y. Okay, so now we have these two super helpful methods. One adds two numbers together, the other subtracts one number from the other. Okay, so that's going to be the foundation of our library. Now we'll add probably another thing or two to this, but that's the foundation of our library. Now, if we want to share this library with another project, there's a few different ways we can go about it. One way is to compile this, get the DLL, and then import that into another project. Another way is to actually put a project in this solution. Remember that this solution is just a bucket, essentially, that holds more than one more than one project potentially, so that they don't normally have a relationship, but if you add a reference, then you can create that relationship, which essentially what it does is it brings a DLL from our library and puts it into another project that has a reference to this library. So those are things we can do, but there are limitations to this. The limitations are that either you are manually taking care of that DLL or you're bringing in the project into the solution. And either way, you don't have the idea of rollback. So what happens if you make a change in this library and it negatively impacts your front-end library or front-end project? Let's just say we introduced a bug, or we changed how subtract works, so now it takes in 3 variables instead of 2. Well, now the front end has to change. But maybe you don't want the front end to change. Maybe you want to use the old version, not the new version, with the different subtract method. Well, we could create a second subtract method and do an overload and have the old code and the new code. But the problem is that that's a legacy nightmare. If you want to go forward and do things differently, then do them differently. Don't do them the old way and the new way, and then try and support both. It's hard to do. So the idea of this legacy support, or the idea of having versions, different versions being used by different applications, can be important. Also, if we are bringing this DLL everywhere, and let's just say we have 5 different projects that use this DLL, and we make a change because there's a bug in the code. Maybe we had the divide method, and we had divide by 0 error. Well, what do we do? Well, we'd have to build this library and then take the DLL to all 5 projects, and then overwrite the current DLL, then open the projects up, recompile them, and then redeploy them. And that's a little tricky, especially if you don't remember which project relied on it. So NuGet solves a lot of these problems, or at least makes things easier. First of all, with versioning, on NuGet, if we right-click on dependencies and go to Manage NuGet Packages, let's just look at, well, here's the .NET Standard Library that we're using for our library. That's a NuGet package. And notice the version. Now, I can't go back because it's blocked by project, but I could otherwise select a different version. Now, if I wanted to install a new package, let's say newtonsoft.json, I can say, yeah, 12.0.2 is cool, but I actually want 4.0.3. And you can install that version. And that allows you to go backwards compatible or move back in time if you have a dependency on an older version, or if the newer version doesn't support the platform you're on. And so there's a lot of power here. And if, for example, Microsoft came out with a version 2.0.4, that would be in this list. We can upgrade it. Now, there's a couple more things I want to mention before we get into actually using our code. And there is a little bit of setup I have to do before we get there. So the first thing to talk about is the idea of these names. These names are actually reserved, meaning when you create a name for your NuGet package, that then can't be used by somebody else. Okay, so it's kind of like a domain name. Once you have it, nobody else can use it on that hosting platform. So this right here comes from NuGet itself, the public repository. And if we look here, it says NuGet.org, maybe a little small, but NuGet.org. So on NuGet.org, I can't create a netstandard.library package. It'll say, no, you don't own that. That's somebody else. So your name is kind of important, because once you choose that name, you also can't then decide, I'm going to change that name, because it will break everybody's package. So you would have then two different packages instead of one package with a new name. The other thing to note is where you publish your package. This is on NuGet.org, which is a public site, which means everyone has access to your code to download it. That doesn't mean you can't charge for your code. If we look here in the browse, we could actually find, and they're not usually on the top, we can find items where there's a paid version as well as a free version. Or there's a trial version that's a NuGet package. So there are ways of going about that. However, in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take our library and we're going to publish it to a private repository. The idea here is we're working at a company or even just personally, and we have code that's proprietary to us. It's not open source. And we don't want to give it to everybody. But we want to have NuGet packages just for us internally. And so that's what we're going to do today. Now, to create a public NuGet package on NuGet.org, not much different, okay? But this way we can demonstrate how do we keep our code to ourselves, to just our company or just our colleagues, okay? So that's the plan. Now we're going to publish it first manually, and then we'll create an automated way to publish it, or semi-automated, through Azure DevOps. All right, so let's get started. The first thing we need to do is set up a NuGet package feed to send this package to once we create the package. To do that, let's go over to my Azure DevOps site. Okay, Azure DevOps, which I've already created. I have an Azure DevOps organization. And in here, I have just 4 different projects. Now, if you don't have one yet, you can go to visualstudio.com, and there's a sign up there for free for Azure DevOps. Once you create your DevOps account, you can log into it. And then if you don't have a project yet, create a project. Doesn't have to be anything significant, because what we're going to do is use Azure Artifacts. And that's free, and it's across all of our projects. So it doesn't even matter which of these I click on, because it will use the same backend. So let's do Docker Tools, and we're going to go to Artifacts. Now this is Azure DevOps Artifacts, and this is where we can store our packages. Now there's a lot of cool benefits to storing your own packages. One of the benefits is it can even cache the public packages that you use. Let's just say you use Dapper. I'm a big fan of Dapper. So I use Dapper all the time. Well, I can cache it here in Artifacts. The benefits to that are a couple. First of all, if NuGet.org goes down, I still have access to Dapper for my projects. I can still do builds. Also, if the team behind Dapper decides, you know what, we're going to pull it out of the marketplace, that would be kind of devastating. Now, it shouldn't happen. And it should be that even if they decide we're not going to manage it anymore, it still stays in the marketplace. But let's just say they're going to pull it out. I still have a copy I can use for my projects. That keeps me going until I can create a replacement for Dapper that I can then upgrade to. But the most important thing here is I can host my own private packages. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's create a new feed. And the feed name, I call this demo feed. And the reason why is a couple reasons. First of all, this is for just a demo. But the other thing is that once you publish a package to a feed, like I said, you've reserved that name. And that name will stay in your feed. So whenever I'm going to create a demo NuGet package and publish it to a feed, I'm going to use a demo feed like this. Because that way at the end, I can delete the feed and all those package reservations go away as well. So just note that's what I'm doing. For myself personally, I will have my own full feed that I use just for real projects. This is a demo feed. Now, visibility. People in IAmTimCorey, which is kind of an odd way of saying that. It's my organization name is IAmTimCorey. So members of the same organization can use my packages. I can also lock it down to just specific people if I wanted to. But I'm going to say everyone that has access to my Azure DevOps account has access to this feed. And that's the default. Also notice use packages from public sources through this feed. That's that caching I talked about, where it's going to save the copy of Dapper that I use, and then I can pull from this feed instead of from NuGet.org. Let's create this. And now I have my feed. That was really simple. To connect to my feed, I have to do a couple of things. First, here is my package source URL. This is what we'll use in Visual Studio to say, this is demo feed. So I'm going to copy that. Now the next thing is we have to download NuGet plus credential provider. What this allows us to do is manually publish packages up to our NuGet feed. We'll get to that in just a minute. And I've already downloaded that, so we're ready. But you can download that package and extract it to some folder on your machine. Just make sure it's a folder you want to keep around for a while. Now, this isn't something you have to do if you're not going to manually push packages. And once we do the manual push, I'm going to show you an easier way of doing it that will bypass the need for everything from here on down. Okay, so just note that you don't have to do this. This is just for purely manual pushes. Okay, so I've copied this link here. I'm going to come back to Visual Studio. And there's a couple different ways of getting to this. If you're already in the Manage NuGet Packages, there's a gear icon right here. That's Settings. And it takes you right here. The other option is in Tools, Options, and then again, NuGet Package Manager, Package Sources. I'm going to create a new source. I'm going to call this Demo Feed and paste in that URL and hit Update. And I will move that to the top. Okay, now when I right-click on my dependencies and say Manage NuGet Packages, when I go to Browse under NuGet.org, here's all these packages. But if I do a pull down and say Demo Feed, there'll be no packages here because I haven't pushed any packages to my demo feed yet. So that's the next step we're going to do is actually push a package to this demo feed. Now also notice you can say all, and then what it will do is it will pull from all these different sources and including your feed. So you can actually search across everything. Okay, so we've kind of done all this setup. We've talked about how to set up a artifact site and all the rest, but how do we actually create a NuGet package? Well, it used to be with .NET Framework that you would have to create this whole configuration file, and it was quite complicated, or at least a number of extra steps that weren't necessarily documented in the most easy to use fashion. However, now it's a lot easier. Right-click on your .NET Standard Library, go to Properties, go to Package. Generate NuGet package on build. We can say require the license agreement or not. We're not going to require a license agreement. For the license itself, let's skip down here. I'm going to say that I want them to use the MIT license, which is pretty much a permissive, do whatever you want with this license. Now the package ID, I'm going to say IAmTimCorey.helper. This is, it's like a namespace. And so you want to name this something that is intuitive and easy to understand. And the convention is not to use dashes or underscores, but instead to use dots and no spaces. So in this case, IAmTimCorey is my base namespace name for this, and then .helper library. So that the next time when I bring in my data access library, I would say IAmTimCorey.data access library. Now the package version, this is one of those that's going to, as you get further into NuGet, is going to be something you have to think through how to do well. And that's versioning. Now, for this demo, I'm going to use the simplest technique because that's the one you're going to start off with most likely. And that is, I'm going to manually update the version every time I want to push a new version out there. However, down the road, you may want to have some sort of automation system to help you with these versions. Right now, we have major version, minor version, and patch version. In semantic versioning, which is a pretty popular way of numbering things, we would never have a gap in our versioning, meaning 1.0.1, we don't go then to 1.0.3. We always go to 1.0.2 or 1.1.0 or 2.0.0. Now, there's tools to help you with this, including a tool called Get Version, which will do some automation here, and it will look at your commits and help you figure out how you want to do this. But for now, again, we're just going to do it manually. Author, Tim Corey, company, it fills it in automatically as Tim Corey. I could change it if I wanted to, but I won't. And this, we're going to call this the, let's just call this the Tim Corey's Helper Library. This is kind of like the title that will be displayed. If you don't have a product name, then it's going to display this package ID as the product name. Description, these are all optional things down here. So we don't have to fill in everything, but I'm going to fill in a few things just to show off that where it will show up and how it will show up. So this is my description of my helper library. Copyright, let's just put 2019. I have the license already. Now, if you want to look into what licenses are optional or available, you can do that. There's a whole list, and I'll include a link down in the description to a list of where you can find out more information about every field here and how to fill it in. Project URL, I don't have one for this demo project, so I'm just going to put my www.IAmTimCorey.com. Icon URL. If you have an icon for this package, other than you don't want to use a standard one, you would put the URL in here. And that URL should lead just to an icon, not the page where the icon is located. The actual icon URL. I don't have one, I'm going to leave it blank. Standard repository URL and type. Tags, they're pretty important. This is how you help people find your package. So this would be and that it's space delimited. So every time you put a space, that's a separate tag. So I'd say IAmTimCorey is a tag, so you can find my packages, and then we'll say that calculations, and let's just do one last one of helpers. Release notes. This is the initial release, and we'll leave the rest the same. Notice the assembly version and the file version are all 1.0.0.0. If I were to change this package version to 1.0.1, and then I click off it, notice that it's going to change the assembly version and assembly file version to match. Now, of course, we're going to start off with 1.0.0. I hit save. And now, if I were to right-click on my project and say pack, it's going to build that file for us. If I right-click again and say Open Folder in File Explorer, and I go to my bin folder, debug, and there is the package file. Okay, so IAmTimCorey.helper-library.1.0.0.nupkg. That by itself has everything inside it you need for your NuGet package. In fact, if we were to change the extension here to .zip and then open this up, notice it opens up as a zip file. That's all it is. Now inside here we have our new spec file, which is all those properties we just set up. That's in there. Notice the lib.NET Standard 2.0 and then helper library.dll. And then in the package, it has anything it relies on, which doesn't rely on anything right now. So there's all the information, which is pretty simple. There's not much to it. But that's all the information we need about our helper library. Let's rename this back. And now we have this is what we're going to use in our NuGet package library. So we need to upload this to our repository for packages, our artifacts location. So this is where we're going to use this second and third line. So first we have to add the feed to NuGet. Now I have already downloaded the NuGet Plus credential provider. That's the NuGet.exe and the credential provider.vss.exe. I've downloaded those to my c:/temp folder. Now the one thing I haven't done is put them on the path, which is, so I can't just go to PowerShell and say NuGet because it doesn't know where to look for NuGet.exe. So what I'm going to open up PowerShell. And it's quite big, so let me shrink it down here. So I can't just say NuGet.exe. Hey, I can. Do you know why? Because I actually put it into my System32 as well. The problem with that is that when I did that, it is in the path, so that takes care of it. But this credential provider.vss.exe won't run in System32. It crashes on me. So that's a problem. So let's do this. Let's clear the screen. I am going to run this directly. So I'm going to get a full path to my exe. But first what I want to do is I want to get the location where this package is. So I'm going to copy this link. And I'm going to move it off the screen. And I'm going to change the directory to be that directory, which is quite long, but that's the directory where my NuGet package is. Next, I'm going to copy this right here, and I'm going to paste it in a notepad. And Notepad's my friend. I use Notepad a lot. And this allows me to then change anything I need to. Now, in this one, I don't need to change anything because it's just setting up demo feed as a source, and that's putting the actual URL in for demo feed. So that's not a problem. So I can just paste this in directly and run it. And it's already been added. I already had that in a NuGet. So next, I need to push this package. So let's copy this and again paste it into Notepad. But this time, notice the API key is just Azure DevOps. That's you can use any key you want there, but that's the one that it defaulted to. So that's not a problem, but this my_package.nupkg is a problem. That's not the right name. So let's copy this name, and I'm going to paste that in place. And now that's our actual path. But NuGet.exe works off of my Windows/System32, which is a problem. So I can just say c:/temp/NuGet.exe to point to the correct NuGet, which shouldn't be a problem for you, but you still might have to point to the correct NuGet. So there we go. So the reason I did it this way is because I didn't want to have to say push and this right here be preceded by all of this. So instead, I just put c:/temp/NuGet.exe instead, and now this will work with the right exe, and it will still be relative to this folder so that when we say just this package file, it's going to look in this folder for it. Okay? So it's going to push that file up to demo feed. We hit enter. And it gives me an error. And that's because I have been doing this demo beforehand to make sure I got it all correctly, and I left that source on there. So if I were to do a c/temp, you shouldn't have to do this, but I want to show it on screen so that when you do your first demo, you don't have to run the same problem and go, okay, what did Tim do, and not know. So NuGet.exe, I want to say sources, and let's shrink this down a little bit so you can actually see the command. Sources, and I want to remove, and the name is demo feed. And that didn't work, so let's find out why. So NuGet, c:/temp/NuGet.exe sources list. And so we have 3 sources. We have NuGet.org, we have Microsoft's offline packages, and we have demo feed. That's the one we want to use. But notice it's demo space feed. Okay, so the issue wasn't that I had an old version here that I would use from testing. The issue was I named it something slightly different in Visual Studio. So if we go up to this command right here, it should be that our source is demo space feed. Let's try that. There we go. Now it's pushing it up. Now for mine, it hasn't prompted me for credentials. And the reason why is because I've already put my credentials in. For you, what it will do the first time is it will pop up a box, and it's the Microsoft's authentication system. Use the same credentials that you used for your Azure DevOps right here, and you should be good to go. So now that I've pushed that, if I hit refresh here, I have one package, IAmTimCorey.helper library. So there's my package. If we click on it, we can see all the information about it, including the home page, the license, how many people have downloaded it, and the publisher, more information about it, the description, the release notes for this particular release, everything we need to know for this package. So let's do this. Let's go to Visual Studio. Let me create a new version of Visual Studio. And this time I'm going to create a new project, and let's do a console application. So let's say console. For some reason it's filtering. I'm not sure why. So let's say all project types, all platforms, and not all languages, just C#. So a filter doesn't have a clear filter somewhere, which it should. But now I'm searching for just C#, but all platforms and all projects, and I get the console app and a .NET Core version. Let's do that one. Let's call this our console. Let's call it console UI and NuGet demo console, or NuGet demo. NuGet demo UI. How about that? Or app. There we go. Naming's hard. NuGet demo app, and we'll create this. I want to be totally separate because I want to just really show the fact that this is nothing, there's no connection here between the two projects. So now if I go to my references, by right-clicking on dependencies and saying manage NuGet packages, and I select demo feed, and go to browse, there's one package, IAmTimCorey.helper library. I can install this, and once I install it, now I can come over here to my project library and I can add a using statement using IAmTimCorey.helpers. With that, then I can make calls to that helper library. So I could say IAmTimCorey.helpers but because they already put the using statement there, I can say calculations. Oh, there we go. IAmTimCorey. Interesting that it wouldn't let me use the using statement. Let's find out why in a minute. Calculator. We'll do a control dot there to add the using statement. Calculator dot add. Okay, so I put one level too shallow on. So calculator dot add. Let's just pass in 5 and 2. And actually, let's control access and do a console write line and say the sum of 5 and 2 is, and do that calculation, and make sure this, in fact, runs. Let's run this. And that's really small. Let's fix that. Let's change the font to be something much more readable. Still small. There we go. So the sum of 5 and 2 is 7. So we have a valid calculation based upon our NuGet package. Okay, we can hit enter here and close this out. So now we have an application that's using our NuGet package. Now let's go back to our other project for a minute. We want to look at this NuGet calculation. There's one more thing I want to do. Let's right-click on Helper Library and let's add a new item. Let's get a text file. Let's search for text file, and we're going to call this ReadMe.txt. Now, sometimes with your package, you want to have some type of initial help. Because, for example, it was kind of tricky to know what the namespace was to use calculator. So you might want to add that. So this is my README file. What this file is going to do is this is going to open up when, or we want this to open up when the user installs our package. So let's create a really simple README file to use this library, add a using statement for IAmTimCorey.helper library calculations, and then call and then call calculator.add or calculator.subtract. Really basic stuff here, but that just gives us a sample README file. Now we want this to pop up whenever anybody installs our package. However, that's not going to do it by default. We have to actually make a change. To do that, single click on your project file. Notice it opens up in this new editor. It used to be that if we wanted to modify our CS proj file, we actually had to unload the project and then edit it. Well, now we can edit it without having to unload the project. So single click opens up our project CS proj file. After property group, create an item group. Inside here, I want to create content, and we're going to say include ReadMe.txt, and we're going to say pack. Inside here is true. Notice that pack didn't show up in the IntelliSense. That's okay. And package path is a backslash. Okay, so that's very important. You're going to miss that if you're not paying attention. That backslash right there is between the package path tags. So pack is true, and then package path is the backslash. We save that, and we can say reload all, and that's going to reload that file. And of course, it's going to error on me, even though it worked before. Let's find out what the problem is. So let's edit that file. And for some reason, I have a double quote at the end of content. Not sure why that's there. XML files in Visual Studio have never worked quite right. There's always been some kind of weird issue. The biggest one is if you're in C# and you type double quotes at the end here, it's going to just move your cursor beyond the double quotes. In XML, it's going to put another double quotes and cause problems. That's probably what happened. Is I probably just, without thinking about it, I put another double quotes. Let's close it out and let's reload the project. There we go. Life is good again, and we're all set. So let's right-click on our project and go to Properties and change this version now to 1.0.1. The only thing we've added is that README file. But now let's do a pack. And now we can go back to our PowerShell. Let's clear this window and do the exact same push, only this time we're going to push the 1.0.1 version. Now I know that's there because I just packed it, but I could go and look to make sure it's there, but it is there. Let's run this, and it's going to push this version. Now once this is done, we can go to our other project, our NuGet demo app. We can go to Dependencies, right-click, Manage NuGet Packages. And now notice Updates has 1 after it because we're on version 1.0.0, but we can't upgrade to the latest stable version of 1.0.1. Let's do that. It's updated, and now notice ReadMe.txt has opened, and there's my README. So we've just changed versions, and we've got that new ReadMe.txt to work. Now note, ReadMe.txt is not over here on the right in my solution. It's missing. So where is it? Well, if you hover over the tab, it gives you the path. And that path is to the actual helper library into the packages. So that's where the README is located. It's actually with the package. So we can close out of this, and once we do, it's going to be gone. We can't really get it back without going into the packages itself and finding it. But that way, we can help our users out when it comes to starting up with using our package. So that's all there is to create a NuGet package. But we're not done yet. Because this manual process is a little bit kludgy. So let's create an automated process. Let's go back to Azure DevOps, and I'm going to create a new project. Let's call this NuGet Demo. And we're going to leave everything else as it is and hit create. And we're going to create a new repository for this project. So inside our repo, let's add a README and create a git ignore file for Visual Studio and say initialize. And then we're going to click the clone button to grab that URL to clone it. Now let's do this. Let's right inside my temp folder, right click and say git bash here. And then inside git bash, I'm going to say git clone. And I'm going to do my, I believe it's shift insert, yep, to paste that in and hit enter. And that's going to clone my repository, which is pretty much empty. There's not much to it. It's just the git ignore file and the README. Let's go over and find our NuGet package. So let's go to our NuGet package here. I'm going to right click on my solution, open folder in File Explorer and close this out. And then I'm going to grab these two files. I'm going to copy them and I'm going to paste them into my new repository folder, which essentially what I just did was I just add this to source control. I had an existing application. I'm now putting it into source control. Let's open up this solution. And once I do, and once it loads, then we can add all of this to source control. So let's select everything. We're going to stage it all and just say initial code commit. Let's stage that, and we'll go to sync, and we'll push this out. That way we have everything on our repository. Okay, so if we refresh this, we should see that we have our solution file and all of our project files in our repository. Now, note that when I made my copy, I didn't just copy the solution file. This is a common misconception. This solution file is just the file that says here's where all the projects are located on your hard drive. It doesn't have any code in it. You can't just copy a solution file and expect it to work anywhere else. The real application, although the meat and potatoes of your application is inside the folders. And here we have our CS_proj file, which again is not enough. We also need our CS files. That's where the actual code lives. But if you want to give it to somebody else, or if you want to add it to a repository, you have to select the solution file and every other folder in there that is related to a project. Okay, select all of those, and then you can put it into your repository. Or if you want to email it to somebody, you need all of those. So now we have the code in our repository. We can go to pipelines and go to builds, and let's create a build. And we're going to not do a YAML build. YAML builds can be kind of tricky. Instead, I want to use a classic editor down here. I want to say NuGet demo, repository, and team project from the master branch. And let's do a build, and let's just say that this is a let's just say a .NET. It says .NET Desktop, but we're not going to worry about .NET Desktop. We're just going to worry about the fact that it's a .NET build. Hit apply. It's going to use a version of NuGet 4.4.1, which we can make some changes to this. We're going to because we want to actually use a different version of NuGet, or actually a different feed. In fact, we're going to use this feed, demo feed, right here for a restore, not just the standard restore, because otherwise it would look in NuGet.org. We want it to look in demo feed because that's where we have our packages from. Now, in this case, it doesn't really matter because we don't actually have any dependencies. But in the case that we did, where we had dependencies on other projects in our private repository or private artifacts location, this is what we need to do. Okay? So we don't have to do this because of the fact that we're not having any restores being done, but we're going to anyways. Now it's going to build the solution, but let's get rid of the testing. Let's get rid of symbols, and let's get rid of copy files. And instead, we're going to add one more task, and that is going to be a NuGet task. So the NuGet task, and this NuGet task, we're going to move right after the build solution, but instead of restore, it's going to be a pack. Okay, so it's going to look for a csproj file to pack, and it's going to build it and put it in the artifact staging directory. Let's go to our triggers here and say we're going to enable continuous integration. And let's add this for all branches. That's what the star means. We're going to save this and queue it, which means it will create a new build for us. Let's change it to 2019. And we're good to go. And now it's going to queue up and run. If we click on this, we'll watch it connect and we'll watch it start to build our project. This might take a couple of seconds to get started, but it should be fairly quick once we start using it, especially since we don't have a whole lot that it has to do. There's not going to be any restores that it needs to do, and there's not much code to compile. So once we start using this, it should be pretty quick to do. But really, your build process, unless you're doing a ton of it, you don't have to worry too much about the speed of it because of the fact that it's not something you do all the time. It's something you do a few times a day. Okay? Now, once you get into an organization, yes, build process becomes important. But with that build process being important, then you can invest more money in making sure you have better speed. All right, so we have an error on the NuGet pack step. So it's saying it's unable to cast to the NuGet.framework version. So let's find out what this means. Okay, so it says that we're unable to cast object, and this is kind of small, I understand, but we're unable to cast the object of type system.string to type NuGet.frameworks.NuGet.framework and a version number. I think the issue here, based upon a little bit of research, is actually in our build itself. We go back to edit this. If we look at our NuGet version, we have version 4.4.1. There's a newer version of NuGet out, and we want to make sure that we get the latest version. If we click on list of available versions, there's actually 5.1.0. Sorry, it's a little small. There we go. 5.1.0 out. So let's actually move to that version instead. So 4.9.1 is what I've heard works, but let's go to 5.1.0. And let's look at this version as well. So this right here is task version. We were on version 0. Version 1 is the latest version. And so you always want to use the latest version of your task when you're creating something. But once you start using it, you have to be careful not to upgrade your tasks unless you check to make sure it's not going to break your build. So this one, under advanced, it has a NuGet version. And it's enabled. I'm not quite sure what's changed in the NuGet tool installer. So I'm not sure why 1.0 is better than 0.0 or point star, but we're going to use the latest version. And now we have 5.1.0. Let's save and queue this again and see if that makes a difference in our build. It should. So the problem was that it didn't understand about .NET Core, and so when it tried to do the build, it had a problem. And since .NET Standard supports .NET Core, that was kind of the issue. At least that's my understanding of what the issue was. Okay, so now we're using the correct version of NuGet, the latest version of NuGet. We just did a restore, which doesn't really need to do anything because there's no packages to restore, but it will at least have on the machine we're doing the build on, it will have the latest version of NuGet. The build the solution, it should be done pretty quickly. Like I said, there's only one thing to compile, one class, not a lot of code, not a lot of work it has to do. Okay, the pack is now running, and it did succeed. And so now we have a successful build. And if we go to the artifacts, go to drop, inside this drop folder, we can see that NuPkg. That's the 1.0.1. So now we can go to release and create a release for this build or for any build. Now with our builds, it's what's called continuous integration, meaning whenever we push code up, it's going to integrate our code by building it and creating that package file. However, we're not going to release automatically. We're not going to have continuous delivery. And the reason why is because otherwise we'd have partially completed packages being released. We don't want that. We want packages to be released in a controlled manner. Only certain builds get pushed as releases. So we're going to do this manually. Let's create a release. And we're going to say, we could use a template, but I don't believe they have one for NuGet. There's no NuGet template because NuGet's really simple to do. So let's start with an empty job. And we're going to call this release to production, like so. And we'll close this out. We need to add an artifact. So the artifact is a build. And since we've already done a build, we can select a build, and it will understand what that is. So we selected our build from our pipeline and hit add. Now, if we wanted to make this automated, we could click the lightning bolt for continuous deployment. Okay, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to do it manually. Now, click on the one job, zero tasks link, and in here, we're going to do our NuGet package. First, we're going to change the agent pool to Windows 2019 with VS 2019. I like to have the latest version. That's all there really is to that. Now let's hit add on our agent job, and we're going to say NuGet. We're going to hit add. We're going to click on it, and our options here are restore, pack, or push. We're going to do a push. The target feed is going to be demo feed. And we're going to check this box to allow duplicates to be skipped. What this is going to do is if we already have a 1.0.1 version, which we do, and we try and do a new push of a 1.0.1 package, it's going to say, just skip it and say that we completed successfully versus erroring out and saying we had a failure. That way, if we accidentally try and push something, then it'll stop us essentially. Now, if you want that error, maybe you want to have that feedback that no, this didn't actually get pushed, then you want to uncheck that box. Note you cannot overwrite a version. So if you already have a 1.0.1 but it's got a bug in it, you can't just say let's overwrite that with a new version called 1.0.1. That doesn't work. You'd have to come out with a 1.0.2. You can retire 1.0.1 so people can't get it, but you cannot overwrite it. Okay, so now it's going to do a push, and let's just call this production release. And if you look at our advanced options, we have verbosity of detailed, and we can say this enabled or disabled. And if we want to continue on error, so maybe you want to have that error, so uncheck that box, but continue on error. Okay, you can do that as well. Let's save this. And now we have our release. So let's do this. Let's go back to our NuGet demo, and we're going to make a change here. I'm going to add a new public static double multiply. Double X, double Y, and return X times Y. So now we have a new version. So I'm going to right click on my project, go to properties, go to package, and change this to version 1.0.2. It's a minor change. I hit save. I don't have to do pack. Instead, I go to my changes in my Team Explorer, and whoops, not branches, changes. And I'm going to select these two things right here and stage. The reason we have the CS_proj file is because that version changed. So we did the compare. We can see the version from 1.0.1 to 1.0.2. That's the change. We have to have both of those. And now we can say add multiply option. Now the user can multiply values. We're going to commit staged and sync. That's going to push it up to the repository. And once that's done, we can come back over to our Azure DevOps and go to builds. And notice this new build has been add multiply option. And that is queued up. Once this is done, and it's started already. Once this is done, we're going to go to our release window and create a new release. But first we have to make sure this goes all the way through the build process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video just because I don't want you to waste your time. Not much time, but I don't want to waste your time if you don't have to. All right, so that's complete. It took 1 minute, 13 seconds. Now I can go to release and create a release. So create a new release. And we're going to use the artifact, which is version 3 with the third build. So we leave all that alone and say create. And this will queue up a new release. All right. So it's been queued. We can click on this link and hey, they've added some new things to the release page. We can look at that later. Notice the in progress. So let's go to in progress and watch as it connects to the agent and hopefully pushes our NuGet package up. So it's already downloaded and it's already pushed, and it got one warning, no packages match a search pattern. So that's a problem. So let's find out why. Let's go back up to edit and let's go back over here to our push, and here's why. We didn't change our path. So let's click on this and look at our build, our drop, and just click on the package itself, and that will change the path to be exactly the right name. But notice it's now 1.0.2. That's not great because we don't want it to publish only the 1.0.2 version. So let's hit star. Just going to look for any NuPKG file in the drop folder. Let's save that. And now let's go back and queue it again. So we can go to production release, create a release, and hit create. And now you can click on this and look at what's happening in our release. We click on queue, and it's going to connect to an agent. Once it connects, then we'll be able to watch and see if this one succeeds or not. Now, we checked that box that said ignore any errors. And it assumed that it worked anyways. So it gave us a warning. So it's kind of important to watch those warnings. Now, if we uncheck that box and say, go ahead and fail, then it will, it'll tell us, hey, this was a failed job. Now let's say that pushed it successfully. Let's go over to our package, artifacts, and look at, hey, helper library. I changed the default namespace, it looks like. So now we have helper library version 1.0.2. Whoops. But notice now we have two different versions. So we have the helper library and IAmTimCorey.helper library. And that's why you don't want to do it two different ways. But now that we do that, we can come over to our demo app, and we can't update because we have two different packages. There's no update here. We go to browse. This is the one we want. So let's uninstall this one. And it's going to give us some errors, and that's okay. And let's install this one. And now we have our correct installation. Now, if we run this, it should still run, but let's first copy this and say and I forget, it's not some, but I forget the multiple, well, let's do this. I forget the wording. It's been a while since I've been in math class. Somebody in the comments let me know. 5 times 2 is, instead of add, we're going to do multiply. And now if we run this, we get 5 times 2 is 10. So we're good to go. Okay, so with that all being set up, now we have our new NuGet package that's in a build process, and our release is just a matter of going to this site, going to our pipeline releases, and saying create a new release. There's no more going to the command line, remember the commands, and all that. We just have to click the blue button that says create release and hit OK, and it will create a release for us and push it out to NuGet. Now, the one thing I didn't do here that I did do in my builds is, if you notice in the edit, the first thing we have here is the use NuGet version. And that was essential to making sure that we have the right version of NuGet. We're using the latest version. And we don't have that in our release. So let's do that just to be sure we have the latest version. So let's go ahead and hit edit. And under jobs, we're going to hit add. And we're going to say NuGet tool installer. Move that to the top. And make sure that we have the latest version. So this is going to get the latest version for us. But the version we know that is available is 5.1.0. Let's save this. And now, just for giggles, let's go ahead and change our version here. So let's right click and go to properties and change the version to 0.3 and save. And then we're going to go to changes and commit this. Just a version change. So this is the pattern you would do once you decide, hey, I've got some code I want to change. You would change the version either before or after. I would do it after you make the change. That way, you're still on the old version. It won't publish a new package. But then once you change the version, then it will publish a new package when you hit that publish. Okay? Now in this case, I'm not going to change any code. I just changed the version, and that was it. And now when we go to our builds, it's running a new build. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this and come back to it once we're ready for a release. Okay, so we're ready for release. So we go to releases, and we create a release and hit create. That's all we have to do. Once we do that, it's going to create release -3, and it's going to queue this up. Again, I'll pause this until this is done. Okay, we're all done. Now we can go back to our artifacts. And if we look, we now have a new version here. So we have helper library version 1.3. If we look at versions, we have 1.3, which is currently selected, but also 1.2. So we now have the different versions of our library going back. So this is how we can use Azure DevOps to help us deploy and store our artifacts. It makes it a lot simpler to do that than running the command line options. Now, if you just want to deploy a new version of your package, you don't want to have your stuff in source control, and you don't want to have to set up a pipeline, what you can do is create some easy batch scripts yourself just to do those uploads in a more automated fashion, but still just on your computer. So either way is possible, whether it's the manual upload or the automated upload that we're doing here. Either way, you can use this artifacts now as your personal feed that can pull both your private packages as well as archive or cache your other packages that you use from NuGet.org. Okay, so that's how to get started creating your own NuGet packages. Now, why would you ever use a NuGet package? Why would you ever do this? Well, as you can see, it's very easy to put your own code in and then use it in different projects. That allows you to have code sharing across projects. I always encourage new developers to start early, but wherever you're at in your development process, create your own libraries. You do code over and over and over again. If you watched my videos, you've seen me create Dapper code quite often. I use Dapper a lot. Whenever I have to access data, especially from SQL Server, I use Dapper. So I have some special code that I use that makes life a little easier. Now in my videos, I just retype it and put it in a class library. In my personal projects, I don't do that because that's just a waste of my time. And whenever I tweak something, I don't want to have to then go to every single project and put that tweak in my code there. So instead, I create NuGet packages for myself. And I encourage you to do the same. That way, you can always have your different versions, and you don't have to upgrade versions. But if you create some cool code somewhere and say, oh, this is an improvement to Dapper in this area, and you go to a different project, you can just get that new version, and now you have that code from the other project you're working on. It makes your projects faster and faster and faster. So I definitely encourage you, if you haven't already, start creating your own class libraries and put them in NuGet. That way you can have this reusable code base that makes you faster and more efficient when you're developing. Okay? So that's NuGet. Kind of in a nutshell, it's an intro. We can go into things like .NET Framework, NuGet packages, which are a little harder. And the idea of how to version things, that can be a little bit tricky at times, like I said, and as well as maintaining this NuGet feed, taking old packages offline. That can be tricky as well. So for example, if I say, you know what, actually I want to get rid of this version entirely, I can say delete latest, which doesn't do a whole lot. I can go in here and I can say, well, let's unlist this. That's great, it's unlisted, but now it's still here. It's still available, it's not in the list anymore. So I can't really delete it entirely because there are dependencies on this package. So we still reserve that. So that's something to think through. Your naming convention is important to get right from the beginning, or at least get close to right. You'll never be perfect, but get close to right. So get that, and then figure out what your versioning strategy is going to be. And if it's major changes or breaking changes, then make sure you figure out a system that indicates that to the user. So if I go from version 1.0 to 2.0, that's probably a breaking change, and follow that pattern. Okay, so if I go from 1.0.1 to 1.0.2, that should not be a breaking change. If it is, that's probably at least a minor, if not a major change. Okay, so think through those things. But to just get started, this video should give you everything you need to start playing around with it, start trying, and don't be afraid to fail. Try it, use it, and then over time you'll get better. Okay, so that's it for NuGet. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.